let us jump straight into Unit 3, Area of Study 1, Business Foundations. So, with key skills, you will be asked to define, describe, apply, discuss/evaluate, and know case studies for every topic. So, don't stress too much about sort of knowing case studies like right now in this lecture. You will go through case studies in school, but in the case that you don't sort of go through them, it's really important to have them, have good like examples and real life business examples with you when you do go into the SAC in your SACs, but also the exams, because there are some questions which are sort of structured around using sort of case studies in questions. All right. It's emphasized that you need to analyze and discuss management styles, characteristics of business, corporate culture, and stakeholders. And that's everything we're going to go through in the first area study. All right, so the first dot point is all around the types of businesses. And so there are 6 key types of businesses. The first one is a sole trader. So a sole trader is owned by a single individual and has unlimited liability. We'll go over what unlimited liability is, but essentially, it's all about in the case that the business falls into debt, the owner is held personally liable, and that means that their personal assets can be seized. Partnership. So this is owned by 2 to 20 people, and again, they are subject to unlimited liability. Then we have our private limited companies, and this is where relates to having sort of 1 to 50 shareholders. They now have limited liability, so and they also have perpetuity, and they're not listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. So this just means limited liability in this case. Now that since there's many different owners in the business, so there has to be more than one, so and up to 50 shareholders. There isn't a single individual held personally responsible or accountable for like debt that the business sort of faces. And then perpetuity just means that the business can continue operating and running in the case that the original founder sort of leaves the business or sort of passes away or dies. So a lot of it just means the business can continue its life. All right, and then public listed company. So 50 plus shareholders, limited liability, perpetuity, listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. So very similar characteristics. Just the key one is the number of owners. So public listed companies are definitely a lot bigger, and they are sort of more of the biggest companies. So if you think about Apple, like McDonald's, all of those sort of big corporations, they're public listed companies. And that just means that literally anyone can become a shareholder. So they're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. And that means that if I wanted to, I could buy Apple shares and become a shareholder. This sort of is different to private limited company because they're not listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, which means that their shareholders are sort of privately given the invitation to be a shareholder. So you can only be a shareholder if you're given the invitation to become one. And that's sort of why it's not listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. All right, social enterprise. So this is where profits are distributed to a community cause. So really important, it's not just distributed to the community, it's towards a community cause. And that's something that a lot of students sort of mix up when they're sort of asked to define social enterprise. They would just say, oh, it's where profits are distributed towards the community. That's not going to get you the marks. You have to really emphasize that it's towards a community cause. And then we have government business enterprise. This is where profits returned to the owner. So really profits are directed towards the government, and that's just the main objective of a government business enterprise is to provide a service. So sort of like a sort of essential service. So some examples of government business enterprise. We have Vic Roads, Australian Post. They're all sort of government-run businesses, and their main objective is providing that service. Awesome. All right. now we're going to go through the advantages and disadvantages of each of these business structures. So with sole trader, advantages is that it has a very low cost of entry, not very complex, and it's not that costly to operate because it is run by one individual. So they don't have to really worry about paying a lot of employees. So in that case, it's not too costly. And also, they tend to be more smaller businesses. So they don't have much of an operating expense. The owner has complete control over the business and can make all decisions. So since it only has one owner, that means that they can really make decisions based on like what they see for the vision, what they they can make decisions on sort of the vision they have for the business. That's what I was trying to say. The vision they have for the business, and so they have a lot of like power and autonomy in that sense that they can just sort of make decisions as they see fit. And then ultimately, they're able to keep all the profit. However, the disadvantages is that they have unlimited liability, which just means that they can be held personally accountable if the business does fall into debt. And so, sort of ties into the next point is that they bear all losses, and the impact of these losses can't be shared with other owners. So, since they are one owner, they have to sort of be the one who bears and suffers all of the losses. And then also they have the burden of management. So it can be quite a lot of stress and burden on them since they're responsible for everything. They're responsible for making the decisions, sort of running the whole business. And so that can be quite a lot. And so that is quite a significant burden on just one person. All right, going into more deeply what unlimited liability is versus limited liability. So unlimited liability, that's just where the business and owner are considered as the same legal entity. So therefore, both business and personal assets can be seized if the business cannot pay its debts. And that's the main key disadvantage of sole traders and partnerships. So if you are asked a question around discuss sole traders or partnerships, that would be a key disadvantage that you should highlight because that's yeah that's a key disadvantage that both of those business structures face. On the other hand, we have limited liability. That's literally the opposite. So that's now where business and owners are considered separate legal entities, and therefore shareholders can only lose business assets and not personal assets if the business is unable to pay its debts. So they're not held personally liable or accountable in the case of debt, they're only losing business assets. And that's the main advantage of companies is that all shareholders, their cars or, their houses aren't being seized, their personal assets aren't being seized, just really what they've invested in the business and their business assets. All right, partnership. So again, offers a great access to capital as a startup. So yeah, since since there's multiple owners now in a partnership, so there's more than one, there's more capital that they can pull off of. So there's not only more capital, but there's also greater access to knowledge, skills, ideas, and experience. So one partner might have a lot of experience in one particular industry, and they can offer a lot of insight and ideas because they have that experience. While another partner might have a lot of valuable skills. So again, they're really they have a lot of they have a pool of these knowledge, skills, and experiences they can sort of take from each other. There's also now shared responsibility, workload, and risk between partners. So there isn't one person who's responsible for everything. All the partners sort of have that shared responsibility, and so it might be easier to manage. And then it's also much easier to set up in comparison to a company. Disadvantages is that the owners have unlimited liability, so their personal assets will be seized in the case that the business goes into debt. And this is a really key disadvantage. There's going to be possible disputes between partners about workload, strategy, and money. So now, since there's more than one owner, all these owners might have different visions for the business, and this might create some tension or conflict within each of the partners, because one partner might think, oh, I want to invest this amount of money to increase our product line, while another partner might say, no, I think we should, um, take the time and invest energy in what we already have and to ensure that, it's of better quality or something like that. So there can be more disputes that can occur and that could sort of impact the dynamic of the business. There's also greater legal requirements in comparison to a sole trader. So, having to lodge a partnership tax return, and then it also lacks perpetuity. Okay, then we have private and public companies. So the advantages of these companies is that they have limited liability. So shareholders aren't personally liable. They just lose their business assets. And then also perpetuity. So a company continues its life even if a director or shareholder leaves. Disadvantages is that compared to sole trader and partnership, it is a lot more complex and expensive to set up, and they must register with the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. So there's a lot more legal requirements that they have to sort of consider and follow since they are a much bigger corporation. Companies experience a higher degree of government control and reporting requirements. So, um, yeah, really making sure that they're publishing like annual reports, financial reports, and making that publicly available. So there's, again, more legal requirements, more reporting requirements that they have to follow. All right, which of these are correct? So have a read of both of those options and put your response in Slido. I'll make the poll available. I'll go back to the slide. Give everyone maybe like a minute to do that. Another 30 seconds. Okay, I am going to have a look at the responses. All right, so 79% of people said left, and then 21% said right. Good attempt, everyone. Thank you for putting in your response in the poll. So the correct one is the left, because as I sort of outlined before, really important with your definition with social enterprise, that somewhere it needs to mention that it's distributing its profits back to a community cause. So it's not just back to the community, because that's very like general. It's back to a community cause. So it's all about sort of seeing what within the community needs more support, and sort of, yeah, trying to direct its profits towards that. And then you would label that as sort of like a community cause. So really important, making sure that you're using the right sort of wording in that definition. Lovely.